Okay, so Brian, how about if we start with you, and then if you want to pass it off to one of your colleagues, that would be great for
Sure. Well,
introductions.
yeah, thank you very much for having us. My name is Brian Pope. I'm a recruiter with Creative Circle. I've been doing this 14 years, and I came from the design industry. So it is my pleasure to always try and have these talks with aspiring creatives, those trying to break into the design industry. And yeah, I'm based in Boston, and you'll see that we have Andrew in Minneapolis, Liz in New York, Kellen in LA, Marie in San Fran, and Kaylee in Chicago. I just wanted to say special thanks to each of you for taking the time today. It's kind of special that we can have boots on the ground, I think, in each of these markets that the schools in the design consortium participate in. So thank you very much for your time.
Did each of the recruiters want to introduce themselves and their background, or should we just get into the questions?
Let's just jump in. What do you
Okay.
think? All right.
All right, sounds good. So just so you're aware, we the predetermined the questions that you had sent in fell under three different categories. One was working with a recruiter. We're going to start with that. The second category was preparing to land design work. And then the third category was the state of the design industry as it is today. So I'm going to act as the moderator for this discussion. And the first question under working with a recruiter is for Kellen. And what is the process like to work with you?
Absolutely. Thank you for moderating and thank you for having me. The process is actually quite simple, just like a brief overview of Creative Circle to start so everyone's on the same page. So we are a free resource to candidates seeking employment in the creative and marketing fields. And to that end, we have a full suite of services, but primarily what you would be looking for through us is job opportunities. And we work both in a freelance and full-time capacity, depending on what clients are looking for, and then the candidates that we match them with, of course. You can kind of consider us a matchmaker, so to speak. But essentially, clients are bringing us opportunities that they may or may not have posted elsewhere. And it's our job to take those opportunities and find creatives who match the background of the role that they're looking for, whether it's in design. It often comes down to aesthetic, comes down to location, it comes down to years of experience. You know, there's many facets of the role that we as recruiters have to understand, and then we're the matchmaker. And the way that candidates get involved with Creative Circle can be manyfold. We can be proactive and find you on LinkedIn and send you a note hoping to engage, or the primary way is by candidates responding to and applying to job opportunities on our website. So when you apply on our website, it automatically creates a profile for you that's then reviewed by the recruiter working on the specific job that you applied to. And then from there, if it's a fit, we reach out to fully engage, get you onboarded with Creative Circle. It's a very friendly phone call where we chat through, or Zoom call, depending on the office, but where we chat through what exactly you're looking for, how you match the job description that you applied for. And then once we get your green light and all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, we get you in front of the client and facilitate an interview process from there. It does vary a little bit based on if it's a freelance opportunity or a full-time opportunity, but which we can dig into later. But the roundabout theme is that we facilitate the whole interview process for you. We're your advocate with the clients as well. And no matter what, it's a free resource for candidates, which I think is awesome, especially coming right out of school.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Liz, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I think she nailed it. But I'm happy to jump to the next question, which is kind of segueing from what she was just speaking of, if that works.
Okay. And that's how do you find people for full-time roles, or is it only just projects and contracts?
Yes, perfect. So as Kellen mentioned, we work in both a freelance and full-time capacity. So in that initial onboarding and process with Creative Circle, we're going to go through a discovery with you and talk about what it is that you're desiring, freelance, full-time, the type of contracts that are going to really make you feel whole as a creative. A lot of people right now are very flexible because the market has been in a interesting place. But if you're looking for freelance specific roles, we'll note that. We'll call you for anything freelance specific. If you're looking for freelance and full-time, we can easily place you in a freelance job. And then while you're working for that freelance job, also continue looking for full-time opportunities for you. So it really truly depends on the type of contracts that you're hoping to get. And then obviously the most ideal candidates are the ones that are flexible in terms of what they're open to, because then we're able to help them in a greater capacity, in a quicker capacity, simply based on what the market's dictating in terms of what's available from freelance to full-time. Just to go a little bit more into the freelance roles, because I think the full-time are pretty self-explanatory. The freelance roles really could vary from a one-day project to a several-year contract. And when we say contract, not a contract where everything is at will. So you'll be at that role for as long as it works for you. But the contracts themselves could be very short-term or very long-term, certainly depending on what it is that you're looking for. We have a lot of freelancers that like to balance a variety of freelance projects at any given time, and that totally works as well. So just be very open and honest about what your ideals are, and then Creative Circle will work within your parameters to find what it is that works for you.
Great, thank you. And Kaylee, I think you would be able to answer this question. How long does it take to be placed in an assignment?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the time frame really varies based off of the current needs of our clients, what the market is currently dictating. We've seen candidates get placed within a day of meeting with them. Some can take a little bit longer. It's all dependent on what your skill set is, how specific your preferences are as well. If you're looking for something very specific, so it can definitely vary, but we do try and start getting opportunities in front of you immediately. And we also try and proactively get your information in front of our clients. If you're fully available and interested, we can get your info over to our clients, and sometimes that can prompt interest. So we do kind of try and work both proactively and reactively upon meeting with a candidate.
Great, thank you. And another question, because we have current students in the audience, we might have some new graduates and alums. If somebody came to Creative Circle and you vetted them and they were ready to go out on assignment, what is it typical that somebody would be working? You had said sometimes it's as fast as a day. Is there more of a just kind of a general time frame, like give yourself X months before an assignment comes up? Is there any sort of guideline more specific?
Yeah, so it can definitely vary what your availability is as well. Some candidates we talk to who are fully available, they've got a laptop or computer, they can get started on a project that day. And it just so happens, we've got a need that matches their skill set that we can place them the next day. And some candidates are currently working or, they have personal situations that they need to work through where they may have to give a week or two notice. And, depending on the time frame of the opportunity, that can also align where we can start getting you interviewing with a client immediately. And then, you can put in a notice to a current employer. So we do work with both candidates who are fully available and then candidates who are working and may have to give a notice as well. So we do kind of see a variety of time frames just based off of what a client situation is. Sometimes background checks are also needed where it can delay a start date a little bit. So again, there's a few different variables that play into that can alter how quickly we can place you, but we do try, if you're available, we do try and start getting opportunities in front of you right away. And then as soon as a client is interested, start interviewing as soon as possible as well.
Great. And it looks like, Liz, you have something to offer?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everyone is very much aware that while we are a free service, we are also a secondary resource. So while you are looking for work on your own is when you should be utilizing Creative Circle. You should always be your own primary resource, continue networking and looking for jobs on your own. That's why the time frame can vary from to Kaylee's point, from one day. It could take Creative Circle 2 years to find you a job if the right role doesn't come about and you're not the right fit for things that come into play particularly, and you have a very specific background. So we don't really like to set a timeline. It really is based on what the market is dictating and what the role dictates and what your portfolio dictates. So it's a very loaded question. We have seen successes same day. We have seen successes that are even more fruitful 2 years later after being introduced to Creative Circle. But I think that the main point is that you should be utilizing Creative Circle while you're networking on your own and while you're continuing to find work on your own. And that way we're a second set of eyes on the market, and that timeline shouldn't be so pressurized. It should be more so organic and fluid. So that way everyone's looking for the right projects for you versus like a forced timeline.
I totally agree. And I can't help but think of a quick anecdote too, just if it's helpful for somebody entering the market. Just today, I have someone starting on a role today. Even though it's a full-time opportunity, the creative director at a startup really likes to try people out before she hires full-time. So she's going to be throwing 5 to 10 hours a week of projects to this one freelancer to see how it goes. She made a similar hire at the end of last year in the same way. So these things aren't always mutually exclusive. You could have and that's one of the reasons why we like project work, at least for starters, is you can kind of date before marriage, try things on. It happens much more quickly. Full-time roles invariably beware the full-time role that wants you to start tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? Like typically there's a little bit that needs to ramp up there. And then to Liz's point, I think there's a real value in working with staffing agencies that kind of know what they're doing. Creative Circle design is A1A now and always has been our top discipline, right? The design discipline, art direction, and creative on the art side is really what we see the most of. So, this is an economy that's a little slower right now, admittedly, but even still, we're a good resource for those types of things. What I love is that when we do onboard, Kellen kind of talked a little bit about the process. We are earmarking the types of things that you do, right? It's not just, oh, here's another designer, but rather understanding your preferences, but also your strong suits and your desires, right? So then we know when to call you about opportunities. So you're kind of, it may be a lay in wait scenario, or maybe you get a job and you're working the job for 5 years, and then you're looking again. Well, we don't have to start from scratch, right? We can already say, well, we kind of know what you were before. Let's kind of add to that narrative as we go forward. So Liz can attest to this. We've been at this company a long time, and that's sort of the way we operate. And a lot of people come back and we know them well, and we can attest to the work that they do. So it does become an ongoing relationship, not just you hear from us once and that's the end of it.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that the talent you attract that is most viable for the kinds of work that you have are emerging artists? Are they mid-career, advanced, all of them? Do you work with students?
I think that varies. I love mass art. Mary Ellen, we've really produced a strong relationship here. We work with a lot of design programs, but I will say that mass art, and the other schools that are present today have a really strong reputation, not just for being good in the design practice, but also in the practicum of design, the ability to really jump in, quickly. There are other really sort of highfalutin design programs I'm familiar with, but will not name, that sometimes may be a little bit too high-minded, in my opinion, and makes it very difficult to just jump right in. So that being said, I always joke, for such a creative industry, nobody has much imagination when it comes to hiring people. So, having some amount of experience, if you can get internships while you're in school, if you can, drum up those, projects on your own, the more you can pad that portfolio out, the less somebody has to imagine what you could do, the more you're showcasing what you have done.
Great, thank you. So continuing with this working with a recruiter and the experience of working with Creative Circle, Andrew, can you talk a little bit more about like the benefits that are offered to people who join Creative Circle?
Yes, absolutely. So working with Creative Circle, we do offer our freelancers and contractors basic health benefits. I would say if you are talking to other agencies, you all might be doing that. That's fine. I would inquire because it might not all be the same for each agency. So yeah, we offer basic health benefits, things like that. Working freelance, you're only paid for the hours you work. So if you do have to take a day off, PTO, you're not going to be paid for that day. However, if you are working a long-term assignment, you can accrue holiday pay, sick pay. So that is another advantage working with a recruiting agency. These benefits are going to be offered to freelance and contract employees.
Great, thank you. And let's assume that you are successful in finding a placement and working. Brian, can you talk more about filing taxes as a freelancer?
You know, it's funny. We took all these questions again are from the audience ahead of time, and we kind of lumped them into these categories. But I'm amazed at how well they flow from one to the other. So to Andrew's point, another benefit of working with a staffing agency or a recruiter like Creative Circle is that we're W-2. So what that means, if you've worked a job, before, oftentimes they are your employer. They're withholding taxes based on your exemptions. Like I've got a couple kids, so I don't have to pay quite as much taxes because of that. So when you claim those exemptions, they withhold less. So you get to kind of choose how you do that. So that's one way you're working for a company. Technically, from Uncle Sam's perspective, you're working for Creative Circle when you're doing freelance work. And then we're just fielding payroll with that company, but we're paying you, hence the benefits that Andrew discussed. But there are advantages to that when you compare it to what's called 1099 or independent contractor work, which if you have your own small client, and again, encourage you to go chase after these folks. You got an uncle that has a pizza shop, offer a rebrand, see if the uncle will pay you something for it, right? Build those opportunities out. But in that case, you're not going to be employee. You're basically going to write up an invoice and say, here's what you owe me. And essentially then you get a check for whatever it is, call it $600. Now, if it's over $600, and I'm not a tax advisor, I want to say ahead of time, but I believe that is the mark. If it's something less than 600, then you don't have to claim it. Something more than that, then you will have to pay taxes on that income. And if you're doing 1099, you'd be wise to withhold. I was taught 25% of whatever I earn on 1099, because as kind of a junior designer, chances are I'm not going to have to pay that much in taxes. But when tax time comes around, if you made a lot more money than you thought you would, and you haven't saved any of it, you're going to owe some money, right? As opposed to it being withheld before you even see it, which is kind of nice. So something to bear in mind. And then I just wanted to bring up another kind of addendum to this question, because I talked a lot about this when I was a junior designer with other junior designers around, okay, so you get the gig on your own. What's a smart way to bill for it? What are going rates? These types of things. Now, the rate issue is one thing, but I do find a lot of people find it attractive, especially smaller businesses, if you're finding them on their own, to know what they're getting themselves into, right? What is this going to cost me? Forget hourly, right? I mean, not forget it, but like, I want to know what this project will cost. And so the temptation is to give a lump sum to quote when you're doing projects. And I don't think that's a bad idea, but only when I came to Creative Circle did I start to discover that the smartest way to do it, I think, is by offering a lump sum that is based on an hourly rate that you claim, right? So if you say, hey, I charge $30 an hour, and this project, I believe, will probably take me 20 hours. So there you go, right? Already I'm kind of looking at that as X times Y, that's the lump. But when you're scoping it out and you say, and this is what goes into it, I'm going to give you, kind of a competitive analysis. I'm going to do some mood boards. I'm going to present 3 different directions. Then we're going to choose one. We're going to move forward on that and iterate, right? And so as long as it adheres to that, then you're good. But sometimes clients change their minds, and now you're on the 5th round of revisions. If you exceed the scope, now you have a mechanism, $30 an hour, that you can calculate on top of the initial scope, right? So you're not locked in. If you don't do that, then you're going to have trouble where it's going a lot longer than you thought, and you're kind of doing it for nothing because you've already locked yourself into this lump rate. So it's food for thought. I always want to kind of share that with people who are going to hang their own shingle. That's a way to kind of make sure that you're covering your bases.
Yes, that was so important. And that how do you price your work, and that experience of being a freelancer is something that people really need to understand. And Kellen, thank you. In the chat, the taxes vary by state. So be sure you're aware of your local tax implications as well. That's another helpful tip. I'm conscious of the time, so we're going to move on to the next category of questions. Unless we have anybody in the audience who has another question about working with Creative Circle. Are we seeing anything in the chat, Meg? Okay, and please unmute yourself if you think of something, that's fine. So why don't we move on to preparing to land design work? Brian, you kind of touched on this. You said if you're a student, internships are helpful. You definitely want to build your portfolio, but how do you make your portfolio stand out? And Liz, I think you might have some advice about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I also come from a design background, just like Brian, and have been working at Creative Circle for over 14 years. So I've seen a lot of portfolios over the years, including creating my own. But I think that the key here is really to let your work stand out. It's not about the portfolio itself being this like shiny online presence. It's really about your work shining and doing that in a clean, functional fashion. Some of the biggest mistakes we see with our candidates, and we use the word candidates when we're talking about the talent that we represent. But when we're working with our candidates, we have a lot of designers, or, you know, motion designers or photographers or whatever medium you might work in. And what they're doing is putting their work up in a way that the hiring manager simply can't find what they need to find. So instead of looking to stand out per se, I'd love to rephrase that as to how you can properly organize your portfolio and make that work to your benefit. So you really want to organize it in a way that is going to be user friendly. There is a very minimal time span that these hiring managers are looking at your work. I believe that it's something between 30 and 60 seconds you have to really gain somebody's attention. And in that period of time, you need to be showcasing your strongest work. So always look at what your website is going to look at above the fold, what work is being presented there, and make sure that's your strongest work that you're most proud of, work that you're gonna be readily able to speak to in terms of your process. Process focused work is very important these days as well. Clients like to see how you got to where you're going in a creative process. So you want to show, typically you want to show the end product at the top of whatever you're showcasing, because that's the shiny, beautiful thing, right? But you really want to explain that well. What were the challenges? What did the team look like? What was the solution that you came up with and why? And then also kind of walk through that process and how that whole design system might have unfolded. Organization in terms of type of project is very important, or you can organize it by brand or client. So it really depends on how your work functions in each scenario. If you have a ton of social media work versus, you know, very little print, that might not work for you. So just think about it. And also, when you are creating these websites, make sure that there's a way that you can send direct links to very specific pieces of your portfolio. So for example, if you are a very generalized designer and you have skill sets in a variety of different verticals, you might want to make sure that if a client only wants to see your web work and you have a print section as well, that you can send a direct link to that web specific work so that they're not getting lost in the print work before they get to see your web work, and then they're turned off by your skill set. So those are just some tips. I wouldn't worry as much about like highly animated portfolios, but definitely make sure whatever it is that you do is showcased. So another faux pas is if you are a UX designer or web specific designer and then you don't have a web portfolio, that's not showing that particular client that you have the skill set that you need to work in that capacity if your work isn't online, right? So think about the audience as well in that way. Of course, you know, there's times when your portfolio is under construction or what have you. If you have a very comprehensive PDF that has animations or is able to link to web or whatever that is, that's fine. But just make sure that your portfolio is showcasing the work in the same medium in which you are able to present it.
Great, thank you. It's such practical advice. And Callan, did you have something to add to that too?
I did, just briefly. One sort of anecdote that I like to use when, the further along you get in your career, the more projects you're going to have, or perhaps coming right out of school, you have a ton of spec projects and you're just not sure what to include on your portfolio. And I always tell people to think of their portfolio as a menu, right? Like, these are the things that my patron, my client, could look at in order for me, again, to the liking of their taste. So put the things in there that you want to create again, that you know you did well, that you would be excited if someone was like, I really like that project you did for your uncle's pizza shop. You think you could do a rebrand for my local coffee shop? And that helps streamline how much you're including as well. Just put your best work and the stuff that you want to reproduce.
Thank you.
I think that's a fair point. And then the final kind of circle to that Bohr model that recruiters may be able to help you with is sort of what is in demand, right? And there needs to be a balancing act here. There's no perfect or right equation. I can also do front-end development, and at some point in my career, it fell off of my resume and my site entirely because I hated it. I'm also pretty good at math. I don't want to do that. So, you know, you may choose what you do or don't want to highlight But go talk to someone who really knows. Talk, you're in a great program. Talk with your professors and do informational interviews and find out kind of what's out there. Even your job search can be a research effort to say, I'm seeing a lot of this, right? Maybe I should promote it. But similarly, you don't want to contort yourself into something that you're not. How many designers have I spoken with that say, maybe I should be a UX designer, because I'm not anymore, but really, there's a gold rush for years in that space, and everybody's considering moving into it. Well, maybe, but it really depends on a number of factors, including, do you really want to do that, right? I know you want work. So these are all factors. And I just want to throw out there, Liz, I love these talks because we didn't plan our responses here, just for the record, but I'm sure everybody's kind of like, yeah, I say the same thing. So it's just funny how we all kind of zero in on the same kind of landscape. Final thought for Liz is, I just want to add to this idea of, like, if you drag somebody through a lot of work, even if it's good, if it's not the work they're looking for, all they're doing is reinforcing the impression that you're not who they're looking for. So conventions on the web, like being able to on hover, say, sure, this is a campaign for so-and-so, and then breaking down the channels that are designed for there, allow people to window shop from your index page or your home page, right? So it's like, oh, okay, I see. And then they're gonna be able to find the things, even if they're their fourth and fifth tile, they're gonna go there first. You feel like much stronger of a fit right out of the jump. So try to find ways to telegraph what the work is, either by the image or by captions or on hover states, to make sure people can shop easily, like a menu, Kellen.
That's great. This is a question that I just love. What non-design abilities make a design applicant stand out? Marie, would you like to?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think it comes down to the interview as well. And I think the biggest thing is clear communication across the board. So being able to clearly communicate your design process. I think that there are many times where I've had clients talk to a design candidate and say, you know what, I still wasn't able to really figure out what was their role in this one project. And so that is something you're able to include in your portfolio, but obviously, of course, in an interview as well as, get your design process down, practice it, and then being able to, talk through that to a client, answer their questions in a clear and direct way. I think being able to showcase all of those gears that are turning in your head in a clear way certainly helps. Being a team player, I know these are some of the soft skills, but truly when you're in a design role, you're working with maybe marketing people, maybe you're working with other designers, creative director, project managers, sales teams, even kind of depending on whatever team you're on. You need to be able to work cross-functionally, be a team player, have a good attitude, be proactive. Not waiting around twiddling your thumbs for something to happen. Maybe there's a gap in a design process or a design, some area of design that you can fill. Why not? Why not try to fill that gap and be proactive in that way? I think that really stands out, especially for young designers too, just showing that you're ready for anything you want, you're hungry, you want to do what you can to continue to grow in this field. Other things are being, project management skills, being able to allocate your time properly, spending time on the areas that make sense, being responsive to your emails, to your hiring managers, to your colleagues, even just a quick, got it to an email to let someone know that you received what they're asking for and that you're working on it. It's things like that, I guess for an interview process, if someone is asking for your interview availability, again, responding right away. That's something that really helps us as recruiters, is to not have to chase someone down, because when you're feeling like you're chasing someone down, then you feel like they're not as interested. So I think those are a few the soft skills from a designer that really help in this process, and that, you can get the job in comparison to other people who are interviewing when you're able to do that. And I'll pass it over to Liz, who might have other suggestions.
Sorry, I almost didn't come off mute. The only thing I wanted to add to that, thank you, Marie, very much for that, is I actually did another chat at recently at a college. And one thing we talked about was your presence during an interview. And it's very important. And it's something that every time I do one of these calls, I actually catch myself. But it's to be said that when you get on, because most of the interviewing is now done virtually, that when you get on an interview call, it's very important to acknowledge the interviewer with either a head nod or a wave or something, just to make a friendly gesture that you're engaged when they're speaking, to also, you know, continue looking engaged, keeping your eyes on the camera, making eye contact with the camera. And another thing that I thought was very important to note is that the space between your shoulders and your ears, and just like holding your shoulders back, just shows more professionalism. And that's something that, the analogy that's used in the studies for that is that when you are confident and you're winning something, that you actually like open your chest and you're able to speak with confidence. And that like people that like lose races or lose competitions or are feeling defeated or failure actually crouch and are feeling like much more reserved. So just pushing your shoulders back, a simple gesture like that on a video call could make you look more confident and feel just make it, the whole conversation, feel more energized for the particular interviewer.
I know we're all like sitting
As
up.
we all shift.
I know. I would,
We're
when
all
I
like,
first did the
okay.
call, I was like sitting like this talking, so it was like really embarrassing. But I do try now. It's a good reminder, but it definitely is something that I notice a big difference of when I'm speaking personally. So thought I would share it.
I love that, Liz. And I also feel like, you know, what you were saying before, of like head nods or gestures, it's all forms of active listening, right? And so hearing, you know, a client or someone talk to you and just like comprehending what they're saying, letting them speak, you know, no interruptions, and then like getting into your head how you want to respond, like hand gestures, and just as long as you're not like looking at your phone or like looking distracted. I have had candidates, and I know that our calls with candidates are very casual, but I've had candidates like walking around with their phone, like I'm like seeing a parking lot in the background, or, you know, I could see that they're not interested. And so then, you know, it makes me feel like, is this like a good use of your time? Do you want to be working with me? And you know, hopefully when you're going into an interview, it is a role that you are excited about. And if it's not, it's at least like, thanking someone for their time and just being appreciative of this time to either practice an interview, get to know the company a little bit more. So every interview should be a good learning experience, regardless of if it's the right fit for you or not.
And are you finding that most of the contact now with you and with clients is happening over Zoom as opposed to in person?
Yeah, I would say the majority, unless it's an like on-site role, which I know we'll talk about later, if it's like on-site 5 days a week, or even if it's hybrid, just to see how the commute is, right? Your commute is different these days. But for the most part, I would say that at least the first and second rounds are typically on phone or Zoom.
Okay. And Marie brought up a really good point. You know, you could see candidates walking around, you see the parking lot, or they're looking at their phone when the client's talking to them. But this actually leads into our next question is, what do you wish design applicants did to make your jobs a little bit easier?
Yeah, I love how all these questions flow together so well. It's like we're all just kind of piggybacking off of each other. You know, I think one of the things to keep in mind is having a ready resume and portfolio kind of at all times, up to date. Having a PDF resume is really important as well to make sure you can open it on all devices. You know, now clients are opening resumes on their phone or on a tablet. And so ensuring you're opening these on all of these different, you know, on your phone, on a tablet, on a computer, your resume and portfolio, and ensuring it looks how you want it to look. And it, you know, the images are popping up and it's loading quickly. So having a ready resume and portfolio, I think at all times, you never know when a new opportunity is going to pop up. Or even when you're networking, you could be at a restaurant sitting next to somebody and, you know, they ask for a resume. So, you know, as well as working with the recruiter, we're sending new opportunities every day. So responding in kind of a timely manner, having, you know, an up-to-date resume and portfolio. And then I know Liz mentioned this, but responding with relevant samples is so important. You know, if we have a role that's asking for, you know, social media samples or, you know, something specific like that, and you're responding and you only are sending us print samples, you know, it makes it hard for us to understand how you're going to be a good fit. You may be able to do this, but, you know, clients want to see that you can. So, you know, being detailed in your response and showcasing, you know, here are my social media samples. We usually always include in our job descriptions or when we're calling you about a position, kind of a top 3 requirement that a client's looking for, or top things that a client told us that is important to them. And so if you can try and highlight those skill sets to us when you're responding to a role or when we're discussing the position on the phone, that helps us sell your information to the client and why you're the best fit for this job. So kind of being prepared, and I know Marie shared that as well, but being detailed, you know, with your response and timely in your response to us is really helpful. And then hyperlinking your portfolio on your resume, so important. You know, if you have to copy and paste a link and, you know, you're having trouble with that, as Liz said, you know, some clients are giving you 30 to 60 seconds as they're reviewing your information. We want it to be as clear and easy to access that as possible. So, you know, having that, and then again, just kind of elaborating what everyone else said, including the kind of details and project details on your portfolio, and not just the samples, but really showcasing your process, is going to make it that much easier, again, for us to sell your information to the client. So yeah, just kind of some helpful resume and portfolio tips. But I think responding in a timely manner, and also just being honest with us on your current availability and your current situation. You know, it's our job to kind of be on your team and help a situation work out with the client, kind of be that middle person between you and a client to resolve problems. And so if you're not honest with us about, you know, what your current availability is or what your current situation is, you know, if you're going on vacation and going to be unresponsive for the next 2 days, let us know that, so that we're not, you know, questioning, as Marie said, your interest in a position, or, you know, if you're still available for this role. So if you can, you know, just have strong communication with us, just as you would with a client, then that helps us keep the client informed as well.
Thank you, Kaylee. And one of the things that you have mentioned is a timely response.
Yep.
For some, what does that mean? Is it, you should call within a day, 48 hours? What does that mean?
Yeah, I would say definitely within a day if possible.
Okay.
And, you know, even if you're, you know, set a time of the day each day that you're checking email. I would say give yourself, you know, even 5 minutes to, you know, constantly be up to date with that. And obviously we all take vacations and everyone deserves their personal time and on the weekend and everything. So, you know, I think if you set some time during, you know, normal business hours, or even if it's, you know, you're checking it every evening or something like that, but it also depends on how active you currently are in your job search. You know, the more active you currently are, I would say it's better to get back within the same day if you are very interested in a position, because you have to keep in mind, you know, in a role, there are, especially for remote positions now, you're opening the door to candidates all over the country that could be applying to roles, and that can be hundreds and hundreds of candidates. And so if you can be, you know, responsive, and obviously you want to be detailed, or, you know, you don't want to have errors in your response or anything like that. So take a few minutes, but, you know, if you're going up against all these other candidates, the sooner you can get back to a recruiter or a client, the higher your chances are of kind of getting your foot in the door first and presenting your information, you know, before other candidates.
Great, thank you. So this is all just wonderful information, and we have about 20 minutes left of our time together. Marie, did you have any final thoughts you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I think Kaylee really covered on a lot of them. I think my biggest thing, which is kind of my pet peeve, and I'm surprised that this happens as often as it does, is sometimes we get resumes without portfolios in the link or in the resume at all. Sometimes it's at the bottom of a resume too, and maybe we didn't scroll all the way to the bottom of your resume. Again, like on a resume, you probably do just get like 5 seconds or 10 seconds of time. And so making sure that it's at the top, and like Kaylee said, hyperlink, and that it's just even there would be great.
There are so many similarities between resumes and the amount of time somebody spends on them, and portfolios, and the advice applies for job searches overall.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. So our next category is actually the state of the design industry. So my question is, do you see any shifts from full-time towards more project-based design work, or vice versa?
So, thank you for the question. So right now we're definitely in a freelance heavy market. It's just the nature of where the market shifts. A lot of times during election years, there's a lot of uncertainty of like where the economy is going to go. So this is a little cyclical. It happens every couple of years. Back in 2022, we had a huge full-time push, and there was much more full-time than there was freelance. So this does happen often, but right now I will say we are in a very freelance heavy market, though a lot of those freelance contracts are very long term. So it doesn't mean that they're inconsistent freelance projects. It's more so that clients are budget their freelance and full-time roles very differently. A full-time job is coming out of a very specific headcount and very specific budget for a department. And they're able to allocate funds to freelance in a very different way and in a more flexible fashion. So they're able to hire in a different capacity for freelance. And right now, that's where a lot of companies are budgeting. They just don't have the headcount and they don't have the budget within their departments, but they do have this like superfluous like funds for more miscellaneous items that they could use freelancers for to cover their needs. So that's why you'll see a lot of that shift back and forth in like stressful economic times for different companies, depending on the industry. There are certain industries that are much more consistent. Government is fairly consistent typically. Healthcare is fairly consistent typically. But when you're talking about businesses that are more B2C, where the consumer's driving, depending on what that business might entail and what they're driving, companies like Amazon are always going to be thriving, right? But when you talk about, more brick and mortar stores or things of that nature, that really is driven by the economy. So based on that is where the shifts happen. So freelance focus right now, but we do expect to see a turnaround on that, likely, end of the year when the election has happened and the economy, kind of stables itself out.
Okay. And Liz, you're speaking to us from New York. Are there any comments from Marie? I see you're in San Francisco. Did you have something to add to that?
I just wanted to emphasize what Liz was saying, that just because you hear freelance doesn't always mean that it's project-based or that it's part-time. If it, we can see 40 hours a week freelance for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. And so maybe it's a long project, or maybe it's something where, hey, we have this one project for you, but it could turn into more and more and more. And so this question is kind of funny because I guess I want to define like what project-based versus like freelance is, because it can be very different. I mean, there are times where, especially in San Francisco, I would say we're a very freelance heavy market, but they're not always just like, hey, I need this one pamphlet done, or I need to just get like 2 emails completed. It could be, the project could be a template. It could be a whole 360 campaign. It could be a whole product launch. And so I just wanted to define like project-based doesn't necessarily have to be like a one-off thing. It can like continue on into a longer term engagement.
Okay.
So Mary, if there's anything that's more national, I do oversee operations nationally for our recruitment efforts. So while I do function, and primarily my 14 years were out of New York, in this capacity, I can speak to more of like the national, if we're missing any regions that are not represented. I'm happy to field those conversations as needed.
Awesome. Thank you. I wasn't aware of that. Okay. And our next question is, in the past couple of years, have you seen a shift in hiring within the design industry? Increase, decrease, or about the same?
Yeah, I think Liz, really kind of emphasized this, right now, the year that we're in, the election year, it can kind of shift things a little bit, which is also relevant to the design industry specifically. But, when full-time goes down, we typically see a heavier increase in freelance and vice versa on those years. So right now we're heavier in freelance, but what I really want to emphasize, I think specifically in the design field, it's such a benefit in these, in this roller coaster of ups and down years, because you can constantly stay up to date with trends easily by doing spec work, by staying up to date on programs where you still have, I assume maybe not everyone, but if you have access to Adobe Creative Suite, I think that's a benefit to stay up to date on creating projects on your own. Just because it's not a paid project for a client, you can still keep your skills refreshed, staying up to date on programs that are currently being used. I think right now we're seeing a really heavy trend in Figma. where clients are all asking for that. So I know there's a number of courses that you can take online to stay up to date in these programs and using it, because that's really going to set you ahead. So even if you aren't currently in a full-time position, I would encourage any designer to continue to work on your own in your free time, create spec work projects, learn these new programs. And they're, like I said, Figma is the current program, but they're always evolving, always changing. So, do your research on what currently is going on and do your best to stay up to date, and then keep your portfolio up to date as well. So I know that kind of elaborated a little bit on that question, but I think that it speaks well to the design field, because we do have the ability as designers to be able to kind of work from home in that way and work on spec projects even if you aren't in a full-time role.
Great. Okay. And do you expect AI to disrupt the design industry? Have you seen any change so far?
Great question. And the very short answer is yes, absolutely. The more long-winded answer is, like Kaylee was saying, new softwares are coming on the market all the time. And it is to your advantage to sort of be keeping a pulse on what that looks like. And right now, AI is a huge push, both from clients and candidates who are just curious, because quite candidly, it's fun to play around and see what it turns up. So while I haven't seen it we've not seen a full AI designer to my knowledge, but we definitely get requests from clients being like, we would love for someone who's passionate about AI or who has dabbled in AI or is willing to try it out, that could come in and use it for concepting, that could come in and use it to help them create a template that from there they can bounce off and add their own creative spin to. I would say the most common ones, as of right now, Canva has its own AI incorporation that you can use, as does Adobe Firefly, Dolly, which I think is part of the ChatGPT sphere, and then Midjourney are all ones that I'm hearing circulate around. And I think it's a really cool and interesting place. The one thing I want to highlight is that it is not taking our jobs. At this point, it's becoming a tool that people are incorporating into their design process, but we've seen no threat of it fully eliminating designers, because candidly, you need a person with a visual aesthetic and a visual eye who can go in and at least tweak, or vice versa, can then take a concept and make it into something really fruitful and flourished. So that would be the primary thing. There's also some cool tools out there that help with the non-creative process, or not, I shouldn't say non-creative, but non-design process, such as workflow implementation, collaboration with other colleagues, gathering data that you can then use to inform your design. So there's other areas where AI is coming into the design process that's not specific to a visual component. Brian, I think you wanted to add something.
Absolutely. So I think also there's kind of two camps of hiring parties, either those who are decidedly enthusiastic about the possibilities of AI, or the ones who are decidedly not. So I would recommend having a spectrum ready to go. I think the ability to work within Midjourney and maybe even a sample of you dabbling in it and coming up with prompts to really get the output that you're looking for could be good to have in your back pocket. But there are a lot of companies that are still not well acquainted on how it's going to fit in, or what the legalese behind using these things might be. So, having a portfolio full of AI, hey, it's a gambit, I guess, if that's really where you want to go. But there would be a large portion of companies that still are just I'm not sure, that's not how we work yet. Two other quick anecdotes. One, I saw a junior AD come out of a kind of more conceptual advertising school who was not a designer, really good concept, and often they're hamstrung by their lack of design abilities, right? Looking for stock photography and trying to Photoshop it, but they don't have the budget to do an art direct a shoot or something for the thing that they really want. And her ability to come up to flesh out these concepts via Midjourney was compelling. I can't help but think that smaller agencies and smaller companies will be the early adopters of that, saying, what do we have to lose, right? And I don't have to go do a photo shoot and I could leverage this. So there may be a trickle up potentially of the adopters, and then eventually even kind of corporate giants. But I also just spoke with someone at a large tech company who the entire department was laid off and they're actually moving everything overseas. But he said really at this point, and they are a big, they're Akamai, they're a big tech company. They were already using AI for things like if we have 500 banner ads that we need to produce, they were already kind of dipping their toes into that. But to Kellen's point, not that it's going to take your job, these heavy production aspects of the job could be kind of handed over to that. And thank goodness, frankly. Anyway, just a little perspective.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The next and last question for this section is, as someone had written in, I feel like there are not a lot of places that are hiring editorial designers. Is there any place I can start looking for a job in editorial design?
So I haven't specifically worked on many editorial design roles either. I would say, you know, kind of like Kellen said earlier, if your end goal is to get to editorial design jobs, you know, showcase that work, take projects on that can be a stepping stone to get to that final in place. Be open to maybe breaking into the agency world where you know that agency might work with these type of clients and these type of jobs. So I might ask the other recruiters who have worked maybe editorial jobs if they have any suggestions here, but really you know, being open to taking on projects that can get you to the next level, what your goal is going to be beneficial.
I think that, yeah, coming off of that, I mean, I think editorial is, you know, print is a different field than it was many years ago. Everything has digitized in some capacity. So I think when you're looking to go into the editorial space, you need to really look at what those editorial companies are doing, and what the work is doing. A lot of the editorial articles are going to social media as well. And, you know, if you look at anything within Instagram and there's like a link on People Magazine to then go to the article online, like, do your portfolios match that from an editorial perspective? Because it's very rare that you're finding a strictly print job these days, within the editorial space. I think that, aside from that, there's also, very specific areas in the country. You know, New York has a lot of the big publishing companies. And also, I'm not sure who put that question in, but is it like magazine publishing? Are we talking about book publishing? I think that, you know, very different types of jobs, and very different niche markets. So if anyone wants to come off mute and clarify that, that would be helpful to answer the question. But also, how could you take your editorial skill set and then put that into doing annual reports or doing something that's a little bit more useful on the day-to-day, versus just working in a very specific publishing genre if you're not willing to move to New York City or have the capacity to do that?
That's exactly right, Liz. God, you keep reading my mind. And not only annual reports, but if we're looking at the types of companies that might have long form as a rule, and it's not going to be your shoe companies, right? But it could be a tech company that's advertising to other companies. They've got a complex story to tell. They're doing a lot of blog posts. It's fun to see how things come full circle. Sure, print isn't what it once was, but now we're seeing a lot of need for editorial writing and for SEO purposes. And then the layouts of even websites are becoming kind of more sophisticated. So really asking yourself, what is it about it? Do you love master pages in InDesign? Is that what we're talking about? Because certainly a lot of B2B companies are looking for long form kind of published pieces. Even if they're a white paper that lives online, they still are within a brand identity system. They still want it to look compelling. You know, there may be data visualization aspects there too, or, you know, interesting type treatments that you would typically find, you know, in a beauty magazine. So expand your horizons a little bit and say, well, it doesn't have to be this industry per se if I still get to scratch that itch from a design perspective.
And I think to go into that as well, you know, they might not have the capacity to bring in an editorial designer full-time, so they just simply don't have enough work for that. So this is when freelance could become a very big part of the way that you work, where you take on an editorial project with one company and an editorial project with another company, because right now maybe they only have like 10 to 15 hours to offer that type of person. So, you know, just to think about the freelance and why that might be beneficial to you in that way.
Thanks, Liz. And Kellen, did you have something to add?
Yeah, and I'm going to use editorial as an example, but I think it can be broadened into any specific niche of design that someone is looking for. When you're looking for opportunities and you're not finding the volume of, say, like job postings that you're wanting, I think a fact-finding mission can be really informative. If you're not sure what leads up into an editorial design position, you could go on the LinkedIn pages of the brands that you are aspiring to, click on someone in the dream job title that you would aspire to, and then go through their work history, see where they worked previously, what other types of companies might then translate into an editorial design position, and begin networking. Even if you're doing informational interviews with people who have no headcount available, your name is on their roster. They've seen you in their LinkedIn messages. They know that you're interested. They can keep you in the back of their mind, but then also they might be able to point you in the direction of other resources that helped them during their career. So I think it's a very good, I mean, if you're not seeing a job posting online, there are other avenues that might be a little bit more circuitous, but they will get you there eventually, especially if you're adamant about following through with them. And it can help make a name for yourself amongst the clientele that you're hoping to work with.
That is excellent advice. We actually have just about 3 minutes, so I didn't know if there were any questions from the audience that you would like to ask. And while people are, oh, Abigail, go ahead.
Yeah. When somebody applies to, like, say, a position and like you're looking at their stuff, is it possible that you will pick up that person? Maybe like they don't look good for that position, but you think that they might look good for something else? Is that a possibility that like you would pick somebody up from for something? I don't know, like
Yeah,
that.
I would say that happens like when I'm sourcing for a specific job and I'm looking through applicants. I would say that happens like a vast majority of the time, because I know exactly what my client's looking for based on the job description, but I still will find candidates who are fantastic designers that may not fit that client's specific aesthetic, but I know that they'd be good for, you know, in my mind, I'm going through like the Rolodex of clients we work with. I'm like, okay, well, if they're not good for that brand, they'd be great for this brand, this brand, this brand. And I'll just be candid and say, I'm not sure you're a fit for this role, but I'd love to onboard you into the Creative Circle system so that we can get you in contact with other opportunities. I'd say that happens like more often than not when I'm reviewing people who applied to jobs. That's a great way to get in our database.
Couldn't agree more, Kellen. I would piggyback to say that there are a number of different recruiting resources out there, and you'll learn pretty quickly that some essentially are so broad that you may hear from them about one job, but the likelihood that they're going to have a similar job again is pretty low because they're filling every single role in every single department in every single company. And I think that's the advantage of working with a creative circle, is by being specialized. Again, the likelihood that maybe it's not this one, but we see so many different flavors that are similar, that we become collectors, not sort of like ambulance chasers, where we're just like, oh, you know, this is a perfect job for you, but you never hear from us again if that one doesn't pan out.
And we have a question in the chat. What advice would you give to a job seeker looking for a creative project management role to stand out, like a marketing coordinator, project manager, those types of roles?
I can jump in. I think that for marketing and project management, at least for Bay Area, that's what I can speak to. I do think that things have gotten fairly specific. And so when we see a project manager role, is it a creative project manager role? Is it digital? Is it marketing? If it is marketing, is it marketing operations? Is it specific to like email? That also, you know, is also for like program manager roles. I think that, again, for Bay Area specific, and maybe I'll let the other recruiters speak to this, but I hardly see the general like digital marketing title. And you all might see this on LinkedIn, that you don't see digital marketing as much anymore. It might be demand gen, it might be, again, email or marketing automation or growth or performance. There are all these new words that come out every single year, I feel. And I mean, that's really where I feel like marketing is going, or project management is going. Like, you know, I certainly have roles right now that are specific to like Amazon storefront, e-commerce marketing. And so I think that for someone to stand out is to kind of to have that experience in those niche areas. And again, what Brian said, figure out what you enjoy. Like, do you like creative, or do you like marketing, or do you like technical even? What is it that you're excited about? And then, you know, try to go for those types of opportunities, get a variety of experience, even within creative. Like, maybe get some print experience and get some digital and, you know, UI, UX, whatever it may be. I think that someone who's well-rounded, at the end of the day, project manager roles, all those skills are transferable, right? From like the budgeting to the resourcing to scheduling. But what makes you stand out is like, have you worked on this type of project before for like the same type of client? Does anyone else have recruiters?
Yeah, I think all very good points. Oh, sorry, Kaylee. The
No, go
one
ahead, Kellen.
big piece I was gonna flag is also just familiarity with like project management softwares. I think a lot of times that can be a deciding factor for a client if they're looking for someone who has experience in Rike versus Asana. You know what I mean? So familiarizing yourself with a couple different ones. Usually we advocate that if you know one, you can learn another pretty easily. Some clients want to hear that, some don't, but just make sure you're also doing the personal development required to be proficient in that skill set versus just blindly applying, being like, I know the design process, I can do it. Really make sure you come in with the right technological background too. Kaylee, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, as you progress throughout your career as well, I think results on a resume are really important in a project management or a marketing position. It's really going to set you apart. So, you know, if you're managing a budget, including the budget that you were managing, the number of projects that you were managing, how many people you were working with, how big the team was, how many projects you're getting on a weekly or quarterly basis. And again, results, because, you know, a lot of these positions can be similar from one project or one company to another, but the pace of the position can be drastically different, and that can really set you apart from candidate B, C, et cetera. So I think including results in a marketing or project management position is really what's going to be setting you apart from other talent or other candidates.
Excellent. All right. We have actually come to the end of our time together, but I wanted to thank all of our guests from Creative Circle. Thank you so much. Your advice was so practical and helpful. So big round of
Mary
applause.
Ellen,
Yeah.
there are a few resource links that I'd like to leave with. Is
Of
it possible
course.
that I could, or could you drop them in the chat? Let me see if I can get them over. I had sent them at the bottom of our question list. I don't know if you have those available.
Let me.
But for the record, we have sort of a career resources link on our site that really, if you're, a lot of these tips, we're able to get to the tip of the iceberg, but there's a lot more about specifics of portfolio best practices in the link. There's also a newsletter that you can sign up for. Highly recommend that. It points to a lot of different bits of content. And then we have an Instagram link as well. So check those out. Hopefully they're somewhat useful to you. And yeah, please do search our site for roles. If you see anything that looks good, please apply. We'd be happy to get started with you.